hear me okay? Great. So my name is Dennis DeSantis. I'm the head of documentation for Ableton, which means when I'm not up here, I'm writing our user manual. Ableton has originally developed as a software company. We make a program called Ableton Live, which is music production, performance, recording software. And now we make a new instrument called Ableton Push. So I'm going to introduce you to Ableton Push today and also talk to you about using it with the Akai APC40 controller. So when you look at these two devices side by side, I'm not sure if you can see them both on the screen at the same time, you can see that they have something in common, this sort of big pad matrix layout. And that's pretty much where the similarity ends. The APC40 was developed to be the best controller for launching clips in live session view. The idea is that you could start and stop clips and really perform with the APC40 on stage. Play with these faders to adjust mixing. You have a bunch of knobs and a crossfader. Ableton Push, while it has the same pad matrix, was designed for a completely different purpose. Although you're still interacting with live session view, what you're doing here is making new clips from scratch. So with the APC40, we're performing with clips that exist. With Ableton Push, we're creating clips from nothing. So the way this pad grid works is that it dynamically adjusts itself depending on what kind of instrument you're playing. So right now, we're set up to play drums. And in the drums mode, the pad grid is divided into 3 areas. And the bottom 16 pads here, you see these yellow pads, are for real-time playing. The kind of classic MPC style workflow that these guys made famous. We have a bunch more pads though, and they do additional things at the same time that we can play in real time. These 16 pads are for setting the length of the loop that you're currently working on. So each pad corresponds to one measure. You can press and hold a pad, and then press another pad to set a loop that's that many measures long. And then the top 4 rows of pads are a step sequencer. So you can set the resolution of the step sequencer using this column of buttons here. So each pad can correspond to a quarter note, 32nd note triplet, or anywhere in between. So I leave it at 16th notes. So now I have 32 16th notes for a total of 2 bars. The last pad that you play is the one that's enabled for step sequencing here. So I've set up a hi-hat here. I'm just going to plug in some 8th notes. And now this moving green playhead shows the position that we're at in our phrase. I could turn on a metronome if I wanted to, but I don't need it because now that I have these hi-hats, I know where I am in time. And now I can punch in real time. Okay, it's a little sloppy, not the best finger drummer in the world, so I'll quantize that. I'll punch out of recording, enable quantization, and dial this down to like 78% or something. Now I've moved the real-time recording part way onto the grid. Of course, all the step sequence stuff is totally locked in, but the real-time stuff I can move a little bit closer to retain sort of a partially human feel, but fix my sloppy playing. It's the 4th day of NAMM. I'm a little sloppy at this point. Great, so we've done step sequencing and real-time recording. There's also note repeat. So I enable note repeat, and now if I play a pad and hold it down, it repeats at the rate set by this column of buttons here. And these are pressure-sensitive pads too, so as I lean in, it gets a little louder. I can also do real-time swing for the note repeat. So we have a dedicated encoder here for swing. You'll notice these are all touch encoders, so I touch the top of the encoder, and I can see some information about what's happening in the display. So I can dial this up to something absurd, like 100%, or back down to something more musical in the 30s. And now I can overdub. And I'm varying the pressure as I record this, and then punch out. So you've seen step sequencing, real-time recording, and note repeat recording all at the same time and all on the same set of pads. Because we have so many pads, I don't have to switch modes or move things around. It's all right there at the same time. So now I'm going to switch to a different instrument. I have a bunch of instruments preloaded. I move to a new track, and now the pad grid is set up to do something completely different. Now I'm playing pitches. So I have a piano loaded, and the grid is set up for me to input pitches. We have 2 different ways that we can input pitch using this pad grid. By default, we're in what we call in-key mode. So all of the notes on the grid are in the scale that's currently assigned. We pick the key center using these green buttons here, and the scale type using these two yellow buttons here. So we're in C major right now. There's also a chromatic mode. So now I have all of the chromatic notes available. It's like taking a piano and sort of pouring it into this pad grid. So now I move to the right in half steps and up in fourths. The blue pads are the key center. They're the C in this case. The white pads are the other notes in C major, and the unlit pads are the notes that aren't in the key, the non-diatonic notes. So since we're in C major, these are the black keys on the piano. Oh, hey guys, how's it going? So I can play fully chromatic material using this chromatic layout. So I'll play the melody to giant steps. So that's cool. It's no easier for me to learn that on this instrument than it would be on a piano, for example. But if I learned it on a piano in one key, if I wanted to transpose it to a different key, I would have to figure out a whole new set of fingerings. Because pianos have this weird layout, right? Where there are unusually shaped black keys that stick out in odd patterns. So to transpose a melody that you learn on a piano, you have to do a little bit of thinking. On push, you just have to move your hand to a new place. Because the pad grid is completely symmetrical and all the pads are the same size, to play that melody a whole step higher, I just have to move over 2 pads and play the same fingering. So I have the full chromatic range available to me, but transposition becomes this kind of non-issue now. So if I move back to in-key mode, we have a whole different way of integrating with the pads. Now I have no non-diatonic notes. Everything is in the key. Now I can play a scale to the right, but a faster way of playing it is to play 3 pads to the right and then up to the next row. And I can switch to a different scale. So let's say we want to play now in E Mixolydian. I can play the same fingering pattern and transpose that to a new place. So what you learn quickly when you sit down with this is that the whole thing is based on finger shape. It's not about fingerings anymore and finding odd combinations and where you have to pull your thumb under, like if you're playing scales on a piano. You find shapes here and move them around on the symmetrical grid, and you can end up playing the same material in different places. So for example, the pattern for a triad is this fingering, but it's also every triad. So I move it around the grid, and I have the full diatonic range available. Also, what's interesting, you can play non-triadic based music really easily. If I want to play things that are voiced in fourths, because we build up the columns in fourths, it's very easy for me to play a kind of pseudo-jazz harmony. Right? And I don't have to think about whether or not the notes are going to be right, because there are only right notes. I just have to play in time, which I'm not doing so well on the 4th day of NAMM. So that's a look at how we deal with pitch, right? You've seen drums so far, now you've looked at pitch. Let's get a new sound. So I press our browse button, and now the encoders and the display let me drill down through the sounds that I have available. So I'm going to pick some kind of synth sound. I select a category using this encoder here, and then scroll through presets that are available here, and I can load it using this green button. So I have a synth sound with some effects. I move back to device mode, and now the encoders are controlling parameters for this sound. So good, maybe I have a sound that I like, and now I'd like to record a pattern. I'd like it to be the same length as the drum groove that I recorded before, so I enable fixed length recording mode. I know I had a 2-bar pattern before, so I set this to 2 bars. Fixed length is on, so now if I press record, I'm immediately going to be, that's not me. If I press record, I'm immediately going to be creating 2-bar patterns always, and I don't have to worry about punching out, it'll just loop at the end of the bar. So I press play, it starts the drum clip again, and I punch in and start playing at the end of the phrase. Let me undo that since I played a note by accident. The pads are very sensitive. Quantize that, and now I'll record some automation on top of it, some tweaks to these knobs. So all of that automation is now also captured as part of this loop. Now I'm going to punch out and move over to a track where I have a bass sound and punch in a bass line. Quantize that. Maybe I'll do a filter sweep at the end and punch out of that. So now I've quickly created 3 patterns, a drum groove, a bass line, and some harmony material. I could keep creating patterns like this and building up material as I go. So now, everything you've seen so far has been in what we call note mode, where every pad here plays a single note or enters a single step. But now I'm going to move to session mode, and now you can think of sort of zooming out, right? The pads now represent the entire clip that I've recorded before. So I can start and stop clips simply by pressing a pad. It starts at the beginning of the next bar, or I can launch a whole scene of them together. And if you've seen the APC40 in action before, that's a workflow that you might know from here. I can also start and stop clips from the APC40. So these are both talking to my computer, and the computer is sending information back to them. Now that I'm in the APC40 world, I can start mixing. I have faders to adjust different behavior. I also have a crossfader, so I have drum tracks that are set to the A and B side in Ableton Live, and I can quickly move between these two using the crossfader. Right? So what I've been doing this whole time is playing this instrument to create new material, and then working with it over here to mix and adjust things. But what's really happening in the background, we can switch to the computer now, because the fun part is here. The computer's doing something, but what it's doing isn't really important. You play here from nothing, an instrument. Live is in the background, capturing what you do in the session view. When you're ready to mix and edit and turn all of this into a finished song, you turn to the computer and all the work is like 75% of the way done. Now you can move to the computer to do what Live is really good at, that kind of heavy lifting editing. So, and then you can mix using the APC40 as well, and finally take that stuff on stage and perform with it using faders and buttons. So that's a quick introduction to the workflow using Ableton Live with Ableton Push and the Akai APC40. Thanks very much, and I'll stick around and answer any questions if you have them.
Hey Dennis, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
Hey guys, stick around. The in-music booth, we've got a lot coming up. We have a lot more demos coming up for you today right after this. If you want to learn more about Akai, please visit our kiosk. And everything you heard today is being played through our brand new Alto Professional Black Series speakers. So come up, ask some questions. We'd be happy to meet you. Thanks for coming to our booth today, and have a great rest of the NAMM Show 2013. Thanks.